Rows of birch trees line your journey to the Hamden Rose estate. Your driver smoothly and almost disarmingly drives up the road to the legendary property. You wonder at the angel statue in front, noticing its overarching size and graceful beauty. Once out of the car, you wander towards the angelic figure, not heeding an internal warning to avoid touching it. As you feel the torso, it seems to alter color. The bruisish blue that greeted you appears to gradually meld into a scorched green, especially along the face. You stand back and stare at its posture. One wing dips, the other lifts. One arm reaches for an embrace. The other arm, with its hand of missing fingers, is a gesture of threat. You turn towards the house museum, which looks not only haunted but shocked. Entering the celebrated writer's home in an almost careless way, you remark to yourself that you'll depart the place more respectfully later on. It turns out there is no later on.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Edmonds. I'm editor-in-chief for Page and Screen magazine. I am here today with Robert Alexander Wray, author of Willowside, which we had the honor of publishing in our second issue. Thank you so much for being here.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, if you don't mind, could you give us a brief blurb about what Willowside is all about?
Yes, I'll make it as brief as possible. It's a dark comedy / horror piece, and it's about a woman who visits the haunted estate of a famous writer, and by the end of it finds herself translated, as it were. So essentially it's about a woman who's obsessed with this famous writer, not a real writer, someone made up, and she visits the estate to attend a lecture there on his work. And during the course of her visit there, runs up against various scary incidents along the way. In particular, meeting a certain scary woman who works at the estate, and who turns out to be more than meets the eye by the end of it. And by translated, I mean she finds herself split off into, she's sort of fractured, as it were, into three different beings.
So tell me a little about what inspired Willowside and what your process was while you were writing it.
Yeah, well, I've always been a big fan of horror, of good horror films and books. I was a big fan of Stephen King since I was a kid, and I've always been obsessed with the genre. In fact, I remember being like 9 or 10 years old and turning my house into a haunted house in an effort to scare my mom. I think she was more amused than scared, but nevertheless, the impulse to fright and delight with frights was there from way back. And in all the things I've written since, up until last year, I had not written a piece that was a horror story or ghost story or anything of that that ilk, really. And I was just on reading a review of a play that was being done off Broadway in New York. I forget the title of it, but apparently it was an effective horror play. And I thought that sparked my desire to write one myself. And as I do whenever I write anything, I try to find what scares me the most. And I remember in particular this story of something called the Black Angel, which is located in a cemetery in Iowa. When I was getting my master's in playwriting at the Iowa Playwrights Workshop, I heard about this Black Angel statue and how it had various stories to it that were kind of spooky. And I even went to visit it one day, and I I was kind of vague on what the stories were. I didn't really know what the curse was behind it and all that, but just that it was. And so I went back to my journal page uh, when I describing my time spent there, and just sort of used that as a sort of stepping off point to begin this piece. And so that was my impetus or beginning, the story of this black angel statue. And the process of writing the play was just me trying to figure out what the curse was and what the story was behind the angel and what made it so frightening and so ominous and so mysterious. And so I generally use the kind of follow the yellow brick road approach when I write. I just put one brick and one step in front of the other, and I don't know what it's going to be until the very end. So it sort of just revealed itself to me as I went along. And also I was in a sort of mini Andrei Tarkovsky phase. This is like about a year ago. I was watching his films. I love his films. One in particular is called Mirror, which has scary elements to it, but it's very, it's sort of about this dying poet who looks back on his life in childhood and adolescence, and then where he's at currently. And I liked that structure, and I found the images in the film very haunting. And so I definitely riffed off that quite a bit in composing Willowside. There's a huge debt to Tarkovsky that I owe in the writing of it. Some images in it are sort of riffs on images that he created as a director in that film. So the combination of me trying to write something that would genuinely scare myself, along with being inspired by Tarkovsky's cinema, is really where it all came from, and how it evolved and how it found its form.
That's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of form and structure, Willowside is really, really interesting to read. It bounces back between second person, first person, third person, all of these different perspectives. And I can really see that when you mentioned being fractured, coming through the structure. But how do you come to that? How do you start a story and approach it and be like, oh, this part needs to be second person, this part needs to be first person, this part needs to be third? Is it kind of like that yellow brick road you're talking about, or is there a different process?
It's kind of like the yellow brick road. I mean, I wrote that piece the excerpt that I read was the true beginning of it. And so in me trying to figure out what the rest of the story was, really by instinct, it came to me that this story needed to be told from 3 different points of view instead of one point of view. And at first it was, just truly that, just instinct. It just felt right, and it felt like that was the way to go. I didn't figure out till the end why I split up the persona into 3 different points of view, but it all made sense to me, by the end. But as I was going, I wasn't quite sure where I was going with it. I just knew that instinctually this was the way to tell this particular story, so I followed it. I just followed my gut, my instinct, and hope that it would work out for the best.
I definitely think it did. It did for sure.
Thank you. And I think it might have to do with Tarkovsky as well. I wasn't consciously trying to mimic his structure. I mean, his structure in the film is similar in that, it's divided into these 3 timelines, of, as I said, childhood, adolescence, and then as an older man. And so in terms of the fracturing of the points of view of first person, second person, third person, there's one can say that there's a similar thing at work there, but it didn't didn't really clarify, uh, I, or I wasn't able to clarify to myself um, how that was working or why I was doing that till the very end. And when I had the sort of aha moment, that's the product of the curse of how she's been destroyed. So hopefully I'm not giving away too much of the.
I think you're just making it sound more intriguing,
Oh,
honestly.
good. Yay, good. That's the goal.
Absolutely. So you mentioned taking inspiration from films, and I always find it really fascinating when authors take inspiration from different medias. Like if you're writing a play and you take an inspiration from a poem or from a film,
Mhm.
it's the structure and the actual form of those things are so different.
Yeah.
But hearing you talk about this film and the perspectives in your work, there's obviously a correlation. Now, do you
Mhm.
have you being able to see that? Does it come from work in other medias? Does it come from a background of other medias? Or do you just love them all?
Yes, I love them all. I've gotten much inspiration from, books and music and film, of course, and theater, poetry. Um, I mean, sometimes I don't know, the thing for me that turns me on the most is structure, perhaps. I get turned on by messing around with form and seeing what kind of sparks that can ignite in terms of how it affects content. Um, and which is not to say that sometimes content can be inspiring. Sometimes I'll hear a line, someone will say something in real life that'll spark something, and I'll want to follow that for a while. But mostly, I get turned on by the architecture of works, of how something is expressed, as well as what is being expressed. But the vehicle used is what always catches my attention, and I like things that are just different, that are sort of new dimensions, new spaces, new rooms to play in, as opposed to the same old, whatever that means. That always bores me. So I just like to explore unknown territory and having and developing structures that I don't think exist anywhere else except in my own imagination is what I like to do. If I think David Bowie said uh, as an artist, if you're he used the analogy of being submerged in water, and if your feet can't quite touch the bottom, that's when you're in great territory, or that's when you're in exciting territory. When you're sort of out of your depth, because that's where the magic happens. When you're going beyond your uh, um, conscious abilities and tapping into something bigger than yourself. You know, which is where imagination comes into play. Uh, your imagination and unconscious or superconscious is a lot wiser than I think you're conscious. But they both work in tandem. It's hard to write unconsciously.
I feel like that would make things easier,
Yeah,
honestly.
I mean, you can try, you can approach it. Kerouac came close, I guess, with his stream of consciousness. Just writing. I think someone called it derisively. His writing is typewriting, basically. But I love Kerouac. I think he's great, and it just feels really alive. You feel that energy of just going forward, and not necessarily knowing where you're going to land, but you're just going. And I find great artists, all from all mediums, whether it's painting or music, poetry. That's there's times in their lives when they're just going, and creating at warp speed beyond their own I don't know if will is the right word, but they're in touch with something that's greater, and it's fun when that happens. When you're exploring the unknown, going into uncharted territory. That's the best. Mhm. When no man has gone before, as they say.
I agree. It makes it so much more fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so tell me a little bit about how you got your start in writing. What brought you here?
Well, I've been writing since I was a kid. Since I was in first, second grade, I would write plays and skits and poetry, and I would put on plays for my family to perform, and so the impulse to capture what was going on in my head in written form was there from early times, and it's an impulse that has never left me. I still get that same unadulterated pure joy and from the act of it, and so I find it a very vital component of making sense of life. There's a certain wisdom that sort of organically kind of rears its head when you take time to write things down, as opposed to just thinking or meditating on things, which is great too. But there's a certain, I guess, motor control when your whole body is engaged in putting words onto paper, where you can almost reveal yourself to yourself and gain insights that normally you would not have if you hadn't taken the time or the effort to put that kind of attention on something. It's the meaning of mind and matter, I guess, in a certain sense, because it's very physical as well as mental, and so that's always been a necessary activity for me to stay sane. And I often find when I'm writing things, I'll after the fact, I will be amazed at what it reveals to me, about where I was at the time, or what was going on with me, or what certain even lifelong issues I might have, what's up with that. And it really does put a light on things that usually remain dark, when you don't give them any attention. So it's almost as necessary as breathing in a way, to a certain degree. But yeah, I've always loved writing, and I love writers, and love getting lost in books, and luckily I still have that desire to create stories, that people can get lost in. I love being able to do that for others, as well as have it being done to me, whether it's Jane Austen or Emily Dickinson or Shakespeare or Chekhov or George Saunders, to name a more recent writer who I love and adore and get inspired by.
Speaking of still feeling inspired,
Mhm.
I know you have a play coming out.
Yes. Speaking of which, yes, it's a one-person show called Glass Elegy, and it's essentially about a film location scout who's trying to make sense of existence, and similar to Tarkovsky in a way, kind of. There's 4 different storylines that the location scout, his name is George, hopscotches between. And it also involves music, live music. There's a jazz musician who will be on stage playing along, sort of having a conversation in a way with the main speaker. But it's just a non-linear narrative of this person's recollections, and and mostly it's about him trying to confront and uproot the source of a very particular sadness that he carries with him, and trying to let go of death is a big part of it. At the still center of the play is the figure of death, which figures into all the storylines of the piece. But there's a big and there's a lot about art, the healing power of art. So much is made of that, you know. There's an actor that he meets, there's a painter that he meets, and there's especially a dancer that he meets and comes to know and love, who he misses greatly, and which is one of the main reasons he goes. He tells this tale that he does. A lot of it's in tribute to this dancer who's no longer around. Yeah. But yeah, so it's it's kind of experimental, and hopefully it works. We have our first rehearsal tonight. What is this, April 11th, and with the musician, and we open on May 18th, and we run for 1 weekend only at Live Arts Theater in Charlottesville, Virginia. It might be recorded. Hopefully it will be available to stream. I hope. But it's called Looking Glass Elegy, and if you just Google Looking Glass Elegy, you'll be able to find out if you can stream it or not. So yeah, if you're in Virginia, come on by May 18th, 19th, and the 20th.
Sadly, I will be waiting for the stream, but hopefully someone listening out there is from Virginia and will be able to go see it, because that sounds amazing. I love, again, you have this incorporation of all of these different mediums and nods to artist, musician, film. I love that. I love the combination of all of that. It sounds so cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, hopefully it all works. There's a lot of elements that I'm juggling, you know, with the music, the acting, you know, the words, the lighting, the production elements, the story itself, all of that, you know, hopefully it all comes together and creates like a nice, moving, amazing experience for the audience.
Absolutely, absolutely. I always find it fascinating going from writing plays to producing plays, like all of the moving parts. There's so much involved, and it all just works together, and when it does, it's amazing.
There's something magical about it. It's a great process to be a part of, and definitely, something miraculous about it, how that happens. It's one of the main things I love about theater is the collaborative aspect of it, you know, and other people put their imaginations to helping something get realized and concretized in quote unquote real life, you know, for others. It's a powerful, beautiful thing, especially when it works.
Last question, big question. What is your number one piece of advice for writers out there?
I hope people, you know, these are tough times to be a writer. There's so much in the air that is censorious, and you know, there's such pressure to be politically correct these days, and not to be, you know, people, I don't know, with the book banning and all these kinds of just autocratic impulses that seem to be infiltrating our culture are something to definitely work against as a writer. As a writer, you know, a real writer, I think you have a duty to speak truth to power, and hopefully writers out there will continue to write what they feel and not what they, you know, quote unquote, ought to write to make people happy and not disturb them too much. I think it's important to be a voice in the wilderness for truth, and for looking at the hard things to look at and addressing the issues, you know, of our time that many people would like to just sweep under the blanket or under the rug. So for all the writers out there that have something to say it, and Don't hold back. It's your voice, and it's what makes you unique. And fight the power. This Public Enemy once said, "Fight the power that be." It's important, I think. Yeah, stick to your guns. Otherwise, the work is not alive, and that's the ultimate final test of any work of art, no matter the medium. If it's not alive, it's dead. And the only way it's alive is if you're putting your real soul and self and feelings and emotion and intellect into it, without censoring yourself or judging yourself, and ultimately it can help others, others that are having a hard time facing certain things. If you take that step and face it, you can have a very, not that you're trying to be altruistic or save the world, but you never know how, the good you can do by being honest with yourself and your work.
That's gorgeous advice, honestly.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Fun talking to you. And,
Absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this. Truly. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me and asking. And it's nice to share and get out of my own head for a while and talk to other people that exist in the world.